All right, we will jump on. Thank you everyone for attending another onX Masterclass. We're super excited on this one because we're going to focus on Arizona. And so we have some stuff that we're going to talk about for how to get information for this upcoming hunting season, how to find areas to hunt, how to use some of the tools, whether it's on Arizona Game and Fish's website or on X. And then we're also going to leave a section open at the end for some Q&A. And we actually have an expert on here that can answer a lot of your questions regarding Arizona. And so I'm super excited. It's going to be a fun conversation here. Couple just kind of housekeeping things. First and foremost, please feel free to use that chat function. But if you have questions, post them in the Q&A section, because that's where our team's going to be sending those to us so we can see what they're going, and we'll make sure to try to answer as many as we can. Typically, there's more than we could answer in an hour time period. So we'll do our best, but definitely keep throwing those questions in. We have folks who will be answering them in the background if we can't get to them. But again, we probably won't be able to get to all of them, but we'll try to batch them together as much as possible. The other thing is we will be doing a giveaway, and there'll be a link posted in the chat. If you follow on there, put in your information, we'll be giving away some onX gear towards the end. And then last, we're going to be following up with this. You can rewatch this, and then we'll have some additional resources that we will email you guys probably tomorrow, so you can just refer back to if there's something you missed or you want to go check out something on the website that we show here. But to kick it off, I want to introduce our guest. We got Dustin Darvo. He is the big game wildlife biologist for Central Arizona. Dustin, thank you for joining.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, appreciate this. Looking forward to the talk tonight.
Yes, I am too. I want to preface that I have hunted Arizona for mule deer once. I am in no way an Arizona expert, and so that's why we brought the big guns in here to answer the Arizona type questions. Jumping in, right off the bat, Dustin, for me, like if, I want to go hunt, what is the best place to start? Like, where should I start looking for information? If, whether I'm a resident, non-resident, if I'm looking to go this season, where should I get started?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, we've improved a lot of our online resources, in the last several years. And one of them, I believe that you're pulling up now, Zach, is kind of our hunting page off of our main page. And there's a where to hunt section. So there's a lot of variability in the state of Arizona in between all the different habitats. Everybody considers Arizona as a desert state full of saguaros and cactus and everything. And it's not true that we've got elevations from, 1,000 feet all the way up to 10,000 feet up by Flagstaff, and different habitat types all the way across the board. So kind of your interest in what you might be, either an elk that you can start in, even the game species page, and just kind of get a general overview. But this where to hunt page, yeah, let's go to the game species real quick since you've got it up.
Jump up to that one.
Yeah, that one right there. So that's just a general outline of each one of the game species that we have in Arizona. So if you're interested in elk, you can click on that. And it just kind of gives some details and highlights of the species in Arizona, because it is a little bit different from some of the other Western states that you might be hunting in Colorado or Wyoming for elk. And they've got huge migration corridors where we don't have near that much in Arizona, because it's not as much habitat, or they don't have to migrate because we don't get the weather issues that some of the other Western states do. So starting from this and just looking at the life history of that, some of the habitat needs that they have, some of the areas that they're located, the generic map shows some of the highlighted distribution on that. So after you kind of read that and get a sense of that species in Arizona, we can toggle back to the where to hunt page. And those that might be interested in hunting around, Flagstaff or even down in Mesa where I'm at, if you scroll down there and click on either unit 22, that gets into more detailed information of each one of the game species within that game management unit. So if you're still interested in elk, you can scroll down to that, or bighorn sheep, or the cows, white-tailed deer, and mule deer. Each one of those, we break it down even further and say, here's kind of the habitat types that they're in. Here's some of the areas to start looking, so that you can use this in conjunction with a couple of our other online software systems and mapping, but side by side with onX, and look for a certain peak or a road that it lists here, and start your scouting, from there, and see if it's something both by topography that you're capable of handling, or if there's a little bit, easier area that might be some plains area, because of some access issues or, physical condition issues and everything. We all are a little bit different what we expect. And we don't want somebody coming to Arizona and then get into a unit that is nothing but steep canyons, that's great for a late season bull elk hunt, but it's extreme terrain that you really have difficulty in.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I know. When we were coming down, we knew nothing. And so we started just checking out the website, and it was super helpful. Obviously, everyone has this information, so we didn't look at the exact point that it says, but having these actual boundaries of the unit. Sorry, I got a little lag here, but as we get into the unit boundaries, it's like perfect. I know I can see that. We have a map. onX has the GMUs, but it's beneficial to be able to actually get like a point of reference that I'm looking for. And then when you guys go into the species breakdown and kind of get to see that, it was a starting point. When you've never been there, you know, and for residents, they probably know it, so they can skip this step. But coming
well,
from
even residents don't necessarily skip the step, because somebody that lives down in Tucson, where it is a lot more of the lower Sonoran Desert area, and if they're interested in elk up around Flagstaff, a lot of them maybe haven't been up in that area. So they use this resource, you know, just as much as anybody else. And we make sure and put that out there, you know, to everybody that we talk to. And this, you know, saves a lot of time for somebody wanting to get some generic information coming in the draw. So if we go off to the next step, you know, after you kind of read some of this basic information, figure that out, you know, managing your expectations as far as being able to draw a tag or what the harvest success rate is, that the sheet that you pulled up now is all of our big game species and what the harvest summaries are. So you can see what the percentage of success is on each hunt when you compare it to the regulation book. That naturally the early season rut hunts are going to have a lot higher success than a late November, you know, bull elk hunt or even a cow hunt. So you can manage your expectations on that so you're not disappointed. As you continue scrolling down that screen, we've even got our survey data on there. So you can go back and look at several years, see what the trends are, if they're increasing or decreasing, you know, as far as our calf recruitment or, you know, our fawn recruitment with deer. And then down even a little bit farther, we've got the draw odds for each one of those species. So you can start comparing that and seeing, you know, how many applicants are putting in for a certain hunt, and then comparing that if you're a non-resident, knowing that up to 10% of those permits can go to the non-residents, of what your expectation or anticipation is for drawing a tag in each one of those units. That a lot of people put in for some of our, you know, premium units that are, you know, managed for an alternative age class, a little bit higher mature cohort of animal, but they're very, very hard to draw, whereas they just want to come and hunt Arizona. You know, look at either, you know, a cow tag or the late season bull tags in a unit that is just, you know, an opportunity unit. So I think those are very important as well.
Yeah.
And then we got our age results of everything that we collect, you know, teeth for on there. And then if you want to toggle over to the next tab that had the bonus points and draw process, that Arizona is a bonus point state that has 20% of the tags going during the bonus pass, which is kind of like a preference point system. You know, that those with the most points are drawing, you know, the top tags in the hunt number, and then it goes into a purely random draw after that. So there's a couple of videos, you know, on this and the big game process and the bonus points process, because it does get a little bit confusing, because each one of the Western states is a little bit different. So this can actually educate, you know, the public as far as what to expect to get in, and, you know, inform you a little bit more so you can make a good educated decision on what and when and how you want to hunt Arizona.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I mean, there's so much information before you even start looking at your individual GMU and where to hunt in that unit. Having all, like, you know, the harvest statistics from previous years in the survey, I mean, that's fantastic. And I think it's one of those things where you can really, like, once you determine the type of hunt you want, you can really zero in on which one's going to fit your needs the best. And then obviously, whether it's an OTC or an application, you can go from there. And I think once you jump in, you know, looking at it, you go through all this research, you figure out where you want to go, you apply, or you decide OTC, here's the animal I'm looking at. Jumping back into the map, this is when you can kind of start doing some of your e-scouting. And so just full transparency, I picked a random unit on here and we just started looking at it. And so the first thing I would do is just pulling up the map. We're on our web map right now. I go to Arizona and I just activate the layers I want. I want the private parcels. I want the government lands. I want the GMUs, and then possible access is always good to turn on. It depends in different states, different areas, whether there is some, but it's always beneficial just to at least have it. And once I zoom in, you know, keep going on unit 22, and we'll look at 21 here. I'll jump over to 21 first. You know, kind of the first thing is I have my unit. I find the public and private land. That's kind of the first part of it. Then there's a couple different layers that you can kind of look to try to zero in. The big name of the game is get away from people. And that's, throughout the West, you want to try to find ways to get away from people. And so I start looking at these roads and these trails, and we have some other cool layers. So we have our roads here that you can see kind of the major places that people are going to be traveling. But then even when you go into our roads and trails layers, I recommend turning on trails, trail slope, trail mileage. If you want, you can look at roadless areas. So this will actually, and there's quite a few roads, so we're not going to see a ton, but as I zoom out, it's going to darken everything that has roads, and then you'll see a lighter gradient where there's less roads. So if you're immediately like, I want to get away from roads, this is a quick reference to be able to turn on. Immediately I know, like, yes, of course, it's a wilderness area, so there's not going to be roads in this area, so that makes perfect sense. Maybe I want to start there. And so jumping back on the roads and trails, we'll shut this one off. Another great one's wreck sites. These are going to be your camping locations, your trailheads, boat ramps, anything like that. And so once you turn these on, we can start to look at the unit and just try to find our access in the areas that we're looking to hunt. And so the big thing is, we start looking for the area, we know where we want to hunt. Then we start trying to find ways we can get away from people. And so one good example is actually what I built out prior over here of how you can use it. And obviously we know this is a wilderness area, so there's not a lot of roads, but this translates across. If you take your waypoint tool, and so I know, let's say at the end of this road, that is a potential access point. I can mark a waypoint on there, knowing that I want to hunt this wilderness and I want to get away. It's a good speculation that, hunters are going to go a couple miles to a lot of miles potentially, but I set whatever parameter I want. I'm going to mark this as an access point. And then I can go through and I click on this and I click this waypoint radius. And let's say we think most hunters aren't going to go past 3 miles, we'll say, just for an example here. I can start to put these around the major access locations and get an idea of like, okay, if I really believe most hunters are going to cover roughly a 3 miles in, 3 miles out, 6 miles in a day, obviously in a wilderness, they may be heading in deeper, but I can start to put this around and see these areas where there's less likely to be hunters. Also, if we're looking at this unit, I know there's a bunch of trails in here. And so most of the time, like, it's easy to ride the trail instead of diving off. And so as I'm looking at this, yes, first I have this reference of like, hey, here's 3 miles. I think I will cut out a portion of the hunters after this 3 miles. So I'm going to start focusing around here. Well, there's still trails right here, and it's pretty easy to walk 3 miles on a trail. So then I can start identifying some areas outside of where these trails are and zeroing in on that location. And really right at this point, I'm looking for a macro area, trying to find areas that are going to be good access, whether it's public or private, whatever land I'm hunting, away from people. I can actually get into them. I have access points. I know there's trailheads here, everything under that. And then I'm going to start looking into like much more of a micro area, and I'm going to start zeroing in. And so let's say we're looking at this section right here, and I decide that this looks great because it's a ways in here. Yes, there's some trail access, but it's a deep, nasty hole. And so this is where I want to start exploring. I'm not saying this is where I'm going to go hunt right away, but within this area, I think it's less likely that there's going to be hunters, and it's a good place to start. Next, I can start looking at things like water. I want to find where water is. I want to find where cover is. And so another cool thing you can do is if I'm looking for some cover, I'm going to jump down to, we have a tree and crop layer, and I'm going to turn on this thermal cover. And if you go to layer settings, there's a whole bunch under. I'm going to turn on junipers. And so within this area, it's not showing a ton of cover within here, but what this does allow me to do is at least see where it's more likely to have cover. And if you zoom out, you can see different areas that would be, there's a lot more juniper up in this area. The other thing that we can look is maybe there was a burn that went through or a historic wildfire. Maybe there's a current wildfire. And so you can start to zero in on some of these conditions that may or may not affect whether you want to hunt here or not. And so Once you kind of get to this macro area, then I'm going to start looking at topography and where I'm in access. And so I'm outside of, this mile range that I believe hunters are less likely to be. I know I have a trail that I can get in. It looks pretty easy because I have this slope on. And so red's going to be steeper, green's going to be easier. It looks like I get on top and I can traverse this in pretty quick. And then I'm going to start looking for some ridges that I can get out and find some glassing points. And I know there's water right here. I'm looking in and I find this nice little point. Looking at the topography, and actually there, as I zoom in, I get more of the tree cover layer. We will turn that one off just for a moment. I come out to this point and we'll put it on topography just to make it a little easier to see these lines. I can come out and I can see that there's a nice little point here. I have some water. There's a lot of country. And it's like, perfect. This is a great spot to at least start as a potential glassing point. Yes, it's not that far from a trail, but as from where my access point is, I'm probably 6 or 7 miles in here. So this is probably like a backpack type hunt. So as I'm looking in, I'm going to mark this. And one thing I do recommend, and this is, find a system that works for you, but I always mark potential locations that I haven't been to, but they look good on web map. I mark them yellow. That way it's just a quick reference for me that this is a point of contact or a point of interest. I haven't validated if it's a great glassing spot or not once I get to the field, but I at least know when I get there, I pull it up, and if I see a red pin, that's one I validated. If I see a yellow, it's a potential for, something that I was e-scouting. And so going through here, I can turn on my, where did I go? I'm looking right past it. We got too many waypoints. Glassing. Yeah, right there. There it is. So I'll turn on that. I'll change that waypoint. I can edit it, whatever I want. So if I come up, click edit, I can change the name. This is just glassing point 1. So I'm going to mark that. I can mark any notes if I want to save it. And so from here, it's like, okay, I can start. Now that I have my point that I want to look at, I'm going to go back to either a hybrid or satellite view so I can see. And the thing that's cool is, like, right now I'm looking at 2D. If I just hit 3D right here, now I can flip around and kind of get a view of it. And so as I'm panning around, I can start zooming in and checking out what this topography looks like, and see that this is some pretty big country. Like, I'm up top when I was hiking in, but then if I'm going to go down in this hole, like, yeah, I bet there's not going to be as many hunters down in there. Like, that's pretty safe to say. But I also think from this glassing point, I'm going to be able to see quite a bit of stuff. And so this is identifying that I could essentially glass this ridge over here. I can see on this side over here, and then I can spin it around and I can see all the way to this stuff as well pretty easily. And so it's a good way to kind of get a reference right off the bat. And then if I want to flip back and kind of get more of like a 2D view, I can zoom back out. And so now I have at least a place to start from like a good glassing point. After I've identified some of the access, now I'm going to go back and I'm going to look for back to our cover, and I'm going to start seeing. And as I zoom in, I know there's some water in here, and I'm, whatever species it may be, being able to get a good point to glass and then start seeing some cover is always beneficial. I know, it's whatever time of the year, I'm looking for some good bedding cover that they may be, especially from a glassing point, looking to where they're coming out in the mornings and then they're going to head back to cover. And so I can start to identify some locations where it's like, once I have like a north slope with some good cover, it's like, yeah, this would be a good location to start looking at. And so right here, I know this one's north facing. I can see there's some juniper. It is also in view straight down the canyon from where my glassing point is. This would be a potential location. And as I start to go back and turn on aerial, I can toggle this back off. We can start looking more finely at, is there any burns? Does not appear so in this area. Now we can start looking at where are some benches, where are some areas that these animals might be traversing. Are they taking these saddles through? How are they getting down to this water? And obviously this is a creek or going through the middle. So they can be accessing from a bunch of different locations. But as I'm looking through, I can try to start finding some locations and planning my hunt out before I even get there. You know, for one thing, like if I do see an animal, this is pretty steep. How am I going to get down? And so looking at the topography and planning out, like if I don't see anything here, then I can plan on jutting back over and glassing this ridge and up this canyon for a little bit, and marking another point there. And so you're able to actually plan this out and start putting together a plan, trying to find different areas that you think animals are more likely to be, whether that's targeting bedding and water and food, trying to get away from hunters, looking at specific topography that you want to find. Pretty much everything you can do, you can find starting from Arizona's Game and Fish, start on their website, start identifying where you want to go, but then actually looking into the features and being able to utilize these to scout, plan out a location, then go in the field, you know, midsummer and actually boots on the ground and start validating these. And you can start zeroing in on a plan. And I don't know, you know, Dustin, for you, is there anything, you know, when you're scouting, any major things that you're kind of looking for, whether it's from an e-scouting lens or also in the field?
Well, definitely, as you said, if you want to do any scouting in summer, you know, you might look at the units up there by Flagstaff. Because these right here in that unit 22 in the Mazzell Wilderness area, during the summer, it still gets up into the 90s and 100s, and that's going to be a brutal hike. But yeah, you hit a lot of the key points on that, and then trying to learn some of the, you know, specific tactics for Arizona is going to pull it all together. Just knowing that, especially for like deer, and even the cows, whitetail deer, which some of that area is really good and conducive of that, is knowing that for the most part, deer are going to be up, the whitetail first thing in the morning. They're going to be bedding by 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. And if you haven't found them by then, this is where you get into your glassing skills with the best optics that you can afford, and wearing out the seat of your pants before you do the soles of your boots, because they're in there. They're really hard to find. They don't call them, you know, the gray ghost, you know, for nothing. It's true. But the glassing point is, you know, let the sun illuminate, you know, as it comes up and goes down onto those east and west slopes, and try and find bedding. And then that's when you plan your stock, is from there, and having the mobile version of this to try and figure out, okay, now I see them, how do I get over there, you know, and picking those out. But for the most part, you know, during all of those hunts in the fall for even the whitetail, they may get up and stretch and stand for just a moment, but then they lay right back down. So if you're just trying to glass quickly across the landscape, you know, during the midday, you may catch one or two here and there, but just knowing how that, you know, works in Arizona, you know, is a totally different game. And our whitetail down here, for the most part, are more of a mountain deer than what people are used to being an eastern whitetail, that they're in the plains, they're in the grassy areas, you know, kind of low, you know, areas. Not our whitetail here. They're actually anywhere in between, you know, that 4,000 to 10,000 foot elevation gain. And the mule deer occupy that outside of that. And they'll be fine here and there and everything. But once again, referring back to our webpage where it gives some of the game species specific information is key to kind of play into this, that you've got your topography map up and going right there. And if one area says that, you know, look at the 6,500 to 8,000 foot elevation, use the topography map on that, that it may look like a great glassing point, but if you're at 4,000 feet looking for, you know, whitetail, you're not going to be finding them, you know, for the most part. And if it's saying that they're going to be in the low, you know, chaparral or even in the pines, you may be scouting the wrong area. It may look great on the map, but cross-reference it with what we've got on the website, you know, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, you know, and that's a great point. Once you find, well, you know, and that's the thing too, something might look really good. Like you might zero in and think you have the perfect spot. And then you go there and there's a camp there. There's already someone hunting, or you haven't seen any animals. I think it's super important that when you're scouting to have a, you know, A, B, and C plan. And that way, if this one doesn't work out, it's like, great. You know, whether you're hiking out or you're jumping in the truck and you're driving to another location, just having a backup is always important. And I would say one thing that I did notice too is like this specific example, we're talking about hiking in and we're in the wilderness. because we're trying to get away from people, and we're hoping that there's more game there. The one thing I will say is when I was down in Arizona, starting fresh, we just covered ground. We had places we scouted, but we weren't hunting wilderness. We were just driving roads and just trying to learn the country. And we spent the first couple of days doing a bunch more scouting than truly hunting. But then eventually we decided like there was a spot where it wasn't really, a specific ridge or access point, but it was just a main road. And we decided that it went down to a good creek. There was some water there. And so we were going to go hunt it. We saw some of, the best productivity as far as finding animals from that area. And we were probably a couple 100 yards from the road, but everyone kept driving by and we could hear them driving by. But yet we're looking down and it's just the way it was. You couldn't see the bottom where they were coming to the water. And mornings and evenings, we'd see the deer there every single day. And people were just looking right past it. It was just a, kind of a main road that they were driving into other locations to get deeper. And it was actually great hunting. And so I would say, yes, look for ways you can get away from people. That may be a wilderness or maybe some roadless area, but also like the overlooked stuff. And so you can also switch this and say, I know in a wilderness, lots of people are going to want to go in super deep. And so therefore I'm looking at, I know I only have a day. I'm only day hunting it. And so therefore I think I'm going to go 2 miles, and any further than that, if I shoot something, I'm not going to be able to get it out in a day. And it's like, well, perfect. You just identified where you should start from. Here's what you feel, you can get in, whether that's 5 miles in and 5 miles out, and you feel comfortable in that in a day. But this helps you zero in of like, all right, I should start looking in this area. Like, this is what I'm comfortable with hunting for that day. So you can use this a couple different ways to kind of help you zero in and identify where you want to start looking.
Absolutely. And some of those units that you might look at that have a high number of permits, means there's a high number of, wildlife in that area. So like even just north of this, like up in unit 6A, for elk, we've got some hunts that might have 700 permit tags, available for just an elk hunt. And you look at the map and there's just a ton of roads, which right away means you're probably going to have a lot of road hunters, a lot of people driving around, but use that for your advantage. That they're going to be pushing animals around, and they're going to be pushing them into a little deep area that they're going to be seeking refuge, and use that, to your advantage as well. And like you said, a lot of times people drive right by them and they're a quarter mile in just because everybody's glassing from the road. And there might be just a little ravine that you will notice on onX, and especially going into that 3D mode, that there's a little depression in there that they might be in there. And once you find them, whether it's deer or elk or anything else in Arizona, find them in a specific habitat type, now look on the map in the rest of the unit, because that's where they're going to be at during that time of year. Whether, it's manzanitas or jojoba that's actually, blossoming, got some seed fruit on it, that just during that time of year, it's available. And now all of a sudden you've found where that deer is going to be, and look at that elevation throughout the rest of the unit where your access is, and follow that line, because they're going to be within probably 50 to 100 feet of that elevation, range.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I mean, once you identify something, you're like, I keep seeing animals, this elevation, this type of cover. It's like, well, great. You know it. You can go just look at the map and start identifying places that are similar to that, and just dropping those, for me, yellow pins on there. And it's like, here are some, plans B, C, and D. If my first one doesn't work, I can just keep moving. And yeah, you're right. This unit, for example, ton of roads. So it's like, I can hit this one, hunt it out. If it's not there, I can keep on moving, and I can just start looking at these different areas. Just a couple more things, that I think are super beneficial. And these are, a couple of questions we had gotten more specifically about the map. But as you're marking waypoints, one thing that is nice that we have is, I'll scroll down to these ones that I had here. I can go to, I can tap this, and let's say I plan this hunt out. I'm going to go to add folder. And then from here, I can select whatever I want. And so I can just tap on them and highlight the different ones I want. And it's going to tell me the ones that are highlighted. And I can add all of these to a specific folder that can be, unit 22, whatever. And so add it in here. I can add it to an existing one, or I'm just going to go a new folder. We'll just say AZ Hunt. save them in there. So now they're all added in. And then when I go back, if I'm trying to add more content or I want to refer back to this, I just go to my content, go to my folder, and it's going to have all my waypoints in here. I haven't added the line in yet, but I will. And the one thing that's really cool is you can continue to edit. You can add these. I can remove whatever I want to do. And coming up here in about 2 weeks, currently within a waypoint, let's say Dustin and I are hunting together. I've scouted these all out, validated a couple. I've been sharing waypoints on the app. If you tap on a waypoint, there's a share button. I have to share one individual waypoint at a time. Here next week, you will be able to actually take this folder and I can click share, and it's going to share that entire folder of content. So then let's say Dustin scouted this whole area, I'm scouting a different one. We can share those folders, one link. It's going to pull up all this information for me, and I'll be able to see it and just have it with that one single link. And then it's not going through text and being like, start at this access point, hike up the ridge to this one, and I'm trying to figure out from the links. Now it's going to be pretty straightforward because he's going to have it labeled, start at this trailhead, you're going to hike the trail west, and then you're going to hook south a little bit and you'll find a glassing point. Go to glassing point number 1. And so we're able to collaboratively scout together and kind of add information within there. So super excited on that. It's one, especially with your, if you're elk hunting, you're generally hunting with a group. I shoot something in there, Dustin shoots something, and he gets up to place he has service, calls and asks for some help. He can share me a waypoint right to where it is, or refer to the folder that we had shared and say, yeah, I'm right in this area, right under glassing point number 1. And it's like, perfect. I know exactly where you're at. And then the other one that we've had a lot of questions is saving a map. So everything we're doing right now is all scouting. It's all on the computer. And so one thing you can do, whether you're scouting on your phone or I'm going to show it on the actual web platform, is we know we're hunting this area and now I'm ready to go scout in the field and I want to actually use it without service. All I got to do is just go here, new offline map. And one thing I do recommend is starting with our larger size. Yes, it's lower resolution, but the reason why this is beneficial is this will still give you enough detail to see public, private, roads and trails. It's just not going to allow you to zoom in on that aerial. And so I would recommend starting with a 150. And yes, this is bigger than the unit, but then this way, whether you go hunting to a place you didn't even plan, you will always at least have public, private, roads and trails saved. And so I'm going to click this, name it. As soon as I click save, it's actually going to ping my phone and it's going to start downloading it on my phone once I say, okay, yes, save this. After I save this 150, then I'm going to go in and I'm going to start looking at these areas that I know I want to hunt. And I'm going to start saving. You can save them on top because I want more detail. I want to be able to see those topography lines, or I want to see that cover or whatever it is on aerial imagery. I'm going to take this and then I'm going to save another map and I'm going to start zeroing in and taking this 10 by 10 or 5 by 5, and I'm going to save these sections kind of in a grid. That way, when I go to the field to scout or hunt, I can flip my phone on airplane mode. Doesn't matter if I have service, I will be able to see my location. I'll be able to see aerial imagery, see all the public-private topography lines while I'm in the field. And so this is a pretty cool feature within the web map because I'm doing all my scouting on the computer right now. It's really nice just to be able to say, okay, I know where I want to hunt, I want to save it, and then it'll ping it to my phone and just allow me to save it that way. Just jumping down. So we got about 25 minutes. I think, we'll jump into some questions here. Definitely just a couple updates. Make sure to use that Q&A function if you have anything, whether it's, questions for Dustin about any of the stuff we've talked about so far, anything on like the Harvey statistics or anything there. And then if you have any questions on the app and how to use it for scouting, definitely throw them in. And then also keep an eye out for that giveaway link as well. So jumping in, first question looks like, what elevation would bear be during the fall hunts, and what's their primary food sources? So they're looking, elevation wise, obviously that can vary, but food sources and stuff like that.
And that varies dramatically as well. So hopefully every question that comes in, I don't defer it and say, hey, go look at the unit that you're interested in, read about the species within that unit, because it does change. That, like I mentioned earlier, there's a high variability even in bear habitat, that they're in the lower Sonoran desert area that can be 1,000 feet all the way up to the top of Kendrick Mountain and north of Flagstaff at 9 to 10,000 feet. And the habitat and available forage is different in all of those. But at least like in central Arizona, it seems like we have a cycle of their primary food sources in the fall that, depending on how much moisture we get, of whether the prickly pears really come on strong. And we know these bears are moving 10, 15 miles to go to prickly pear fields, and that just congregate in big basins, and they're just gorging themselves and totally pink and red across the face and paws because they're gorging. But the next year there might not be any prickly pear crop that actually comes up, and it might be all acorns or manzanitas. And if none of those come up, it's going to be like into the juniper berries and just regular grass habitat, that they might be into. So doing a little bit more research, and this might take a phone call or talking to some other people, either online or some social media platforms, to see what the mass crop and what the food crop is in the fall. But they don't necessarily have prickly pear at 9,000 feet up in Unit 9.
Yeah.
So that's very specific. And once again, referring, to the kind of those individual game management, where the hunt pages is really important. But it does cycle, quite a bit from year to year based on our moisture. And we know these bears are moving great distances, from year to year.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And, so the next question that actually tailors in, and this is for kind of all game, but obviously, like if you look here, it's pretty dry. And when you pull up our actual drought layer, sorry, jumping back, current conditions, and we pull up the drought, you can kind of get an idea from a state level, and this is a nationwide layer, so you can kind of see as we zoom out, and it looks like it's a moderate drought. But as we're zooming in, the question is, how do I identify water, and how do I know, from year in, year out? And I guess, the answer to that question is, like, you have to validate, and go in the field. And I'm speaking from experience here. I scouted out an area, and this was actually in Montana, but it had traditionally always had water. I've hunted this unit forever, but last year we had like a 30-year drought in the area I was hunting. And the main place that I planned on hunting, where I was pretty confident there was water, it was completely dry. And so I had to jump to different places. But with that being said, there are ways that you can start to identify. One, we will have it on the map, whether it's tanks. So if you look here on this rec point, it actually shows you where the guzzlers or a tank is, but then also you can see where the streams and creeks are. And so you can start marking these or using these points and adding like points of interest from there. But if it's something like a small creek or something that's not always going to have water, I definitely recommend getting in there and validating yourself, because it can vary from year to year, depending on, if we're in a drought or lack of rainfall, whatever it may be.
Yeah, and cross-reference, your layers that you have with our department layers. If you go into just our wildlife hunting tab section, and down towards the bottom is that environmental resource tool. And then also under the hunting tab, there's AZ access map. Both of those are kind of an interactive Esri, Google type map, but they have got all of the department's water catchments on there that you can compare back and forth. And every year we're either improving them or updating or adding some new ones. So cross-referencing that, and we've got like 3,000 water catchments and tanks that our department manages and oversees and makes sure that they're full, especially the last couple of years that we've had this severe drought going on. So pulling those together, and if you happen to notice one in an area where you want to hunt that it's not on onX yet because we just added it, in the last 6 months or a year, it might highlight you to that area that we put it there for a reason, to either expand or enhance, the wildlife habitat in that area. But definitely pull those, together and look at those.
Yeah, that's great. And that actually ties in. Someone was asking, like, I don't know if they were asking specifically on the onX side or Arizona side, but they're asking the water source information, how recent it is and how much it's updated. And so generally, rule of thumb for onX, we try to do a major update for the states once per year, but obviously when that data is collected, there could be some lag within there. So yeah, I definitely recommend
could be a gap.
out the website on your guys' end.
One of the other hacks that I tell a lot of folks, hunting in Arizona, is go look at some of the social media platforms of the Arizona Hiking Association or the other hiking groups, because they're on the trails that you highlighted just earlier in the Mazal Wilderness area, that those are all trails within the wilderness. They're posting active water for other hikers to be able to hike those trail systems. And if they report back saying, hey, it rained, we've got water here, you can filter it, you can cater your hunt around that as well, that it may not show on our platform or onX or any other platform of some of these seeps and springs and water sources, but the hiking group pages have that on there. So throw that into your pre-scouting, as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a great point. Looking at it, let's see what another one are. All right. How about, so this question is, what are some differences in habitat preference between mule deer and cows deer?
Definitely, yeah. Once again, I'm going to say, like on every one, it's a high variability across the state. But if you look at the distribution of just big game species, whether it's on our page or onX, that you'll notice that the majority of the whitetail distribution is in the southern or southeastern part of the state. And as you come into central Arizona, if you draw a straight line through Phoenix, it starts to taper off. And you get up closer towards, Sedona and Prescott area, that's starting to turn into mule deer country. So we got that transition that we do have desert mule deer down in Tucson and around Yuma, but there's, like no whitetail over there in region 4 around Yuma. And as you progress up to the north, the habitat's going to change that you have, that it's more of, woodlands and chaparral, some oak, and then getting into the pine where the, whitetail are, and their elevation ranges all the way from 4,000 to 10,000 feet. They're highly adaptable, just like other whitetail, that they're kind of moving into these niches that mule deer might not be proficient anymore because they've lost some water sources or some of their habitat, where they prefer, some of the low desert, to even the high forested areas up around Flagstaff. But as you move forward, north across the state of Arizona, you're getting into the mule deer habitat and you're losing out. So just knowing that, transition stage. Some of the central units, you've got both, like in some of my units in region 6 here, that we've got, both species of deer in pretty good abundance in some. But if you're looking that you really want to come after whitetail, in Arizona, those southern units down around Tucson have got a lot of tags because there's a lot higher density of whitetail in those areas. And that means more people, for sure. So you got to do a little bit more scouting, like I said, or drive the roads and you kind of figure that out. But there is that huge habitat difference in between the two. But like I said, those whitetail are definitely moving north and occupying, non-traditional areas.
Yeah. No, that's great. Looking at the next one, we've been talking a lot of deer. On this one, it says, any suggestions on identifying good elk habitat for a late season rifle tag?
Well, if that depends on whether it's cow or bull, because late season bull tags, it's not necessarily great habitat. It's their recovery stage, so they're going to be in the deepest, darkest canyons that have a little bit of water, so they don't have to move too much. And it might even be to the point where they're just eating pine needles and bark, for the most part. They are so exhausted and exerted from, going through the rut and post rut, that here's where you can look at, onX, if you know that you're in 22 North like this, and just find some of those deepest, darkest canyons that got some, good tree cover in there. Yeah, that's where the bulls are going to be. But looking, this is where you pull in some of your precipitation layers in a lot of these units, because the cows are going to follow the great feed, on that. And when you overlay that precipitation layer to some of the open flats or general rolling hills that have some good cover, for them, whether it's, the chaparral junipers or even, the pine trees, they're going to be in that area. And naturally, as everybody's starting to learn over the last several years, throwing that burn layer, over, any burn from the last 3-4 years when we had good precipitation on it, they're going to be in there, because that is the first succession stages of any vegetation, is the highest and most nutrition, based. They're going to be there, for sure, whether it's deep canyon or not, they're going to follow that, for sure.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, especially with bull elk. late season, sanctuaries where, like, if there's ever a time to try to get in the deepest, darkest, nastiest thing, it's like post rut, bull elk. They're going to go there. So find the nastiest looking thing with great bedding, water, a little bit of food, and just, stake it out, start glassing. I think that's a great point. And generally, it's funny because it's one of those things where it's not incredibly hard to identify a very nasty area. It's just the, willpower to actually go in and check it out and see. But it's, you start looking at this and you're looking at this topography and you're starting to find these areas away. You can kind of identify, like, yeah, that looks like an area that has good bedding, but it's going to be a haul to get in there. And so trying to find a good spot to glass, there was another question about how to identify a good glassing point. Generally looking for a ridge that you can traverse up to a point that you have a good view. And whether you're using 3D topography map, it doesn't matter. But being able to identify these areas that you can come off from this trail, take this ridge out and find this point that I can start glassing, a pretty steep canyon that doesn't have any roads, doesn't have any trails. That's definitely a good place to start, especially for a, late November rifle elk tag.
Yeah, and a lot of our description, at least for our Region 6 units, we tried to put some language in there based on snowfall cover because most Western states have true and expansive migration corridors and different movement patterns for elk and deer, and we don't see that near as much in Arizona. If you pull up just a distribution map, overall for the size of the state, it's a fairly narrow band. That's up around there south of the Grand Canyon, works down through Flagstaff and then through Payson area through here, and then over towards the New Mexico border. That's their primary habitat, and they may not migrate hardly at all unless we get 3 or 4 foot of snow over the course of a month. That those late season hunts, they're not moving but a couple of miles from where they were, during the pre-rut and rut.
Yeah.
So they just don't migrate that much. And when you got a warmer climate state like Arizona, it's your train of thought is a little bit different, saying, hey, late season, where are they migrating to? They're in the same area. They're just maybe a canyon or two over. If they get chased out a lot of hunting pressure, they might be 5 miles away or something like that, but they don't have those big 30-40 mile or greater migrations.
Yeah No, that's great to know. Changing, kind of the subject a little bit, there's a lot of questions around regulations and just a couple topics around there. So I'll ask a couple here. So the first one is, what makes Arizona state trust land restricted access restricted? So I'm assuming they're asking on the state stuff, how do they know and why is it restricted? Like, what different things make it restricted?
Yeah, exactly. The Arizona state trust land, since they're a state land department, it's kind of like privately owned by the state, but we've got agreements with them for recreation access, and so do other organizations. But in order to open that up and they can kind of control and monitor how much use is on the state trust land, they require a recreation permit, and it's an annual permit. I think it's like $20 to actually get that. But with our Arizona Game and Fish Department agreement with them, your hunting license is your access permit for state trust land. So if you're hunting on that, yeah, your hunting license qualifies. You don't need another access permit for that. We continue to work with them on any access issues, or if there's a locked gate or anything like that. That's an ongoing process that is very successful. They're very conducive, and they want to know if something gets restricted access and get those open back up again. But for the most part, you can visit the state trust lands website and get some general information. But that's probably the biggest confusion item, is people think that they need to go get another access permit, and they may be bypassing some really good areas just because they don't want to go get another access permit and thinks it's kind of not worth the effort and you can't camp on it and stuff like that. But yeah, your hunting license counts for that as your access.
Well, those sound like a good opportunity for areas people are looking past if they're not wanting to go do a little bit of research, just figure it out. But also, like, the complexity, it's not like a large national forest or wilderness area. A lot of times they're smaller chunks, but those are great opportunities that get looked past.
Yeah, and there might be a lot of checkerboarding in some of the units up around Flagstaff where it's a combination of either BLM, state trust land, Forest Service land, and people think it's really hard to access, or corner crossing, or what roads are available and stuff like that. So yeah, it gets a little bit confusing, at times, but it definitely alleviates probably 80% of the anxiety of state trust land, just knowing that if you're actively hunting, have a hunting license, a valid one, then that is your access.
Yeah, perfect. Jumping on or staying on the access topic. So this one says, what's the process of gaining access to hunt areas like 45A, B, C with military areas surrounding?
Each one of those, of course, just in the last couple of years, there was a lot of, whether it's a bill or just agreement signed with the National Wildlife Refuges to open up more access for hunting and recreation, which was huge for Arizona because we have a lot of those across the state. And each one of those, our recommendation is to go and check that, Wildlife Refuge website to see what the current regulations, because if they have active training or even, multiple training for military exercises, they can still be closed. So it's not like all of them are open. So their websites, each one of them has a hunting page and it has links to us, in our department on there as well. But once again, a lot of people think it's not worth the time, and there's some great hunting on a lot of those national wildlife refuges and military bases.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Next one is, so with the OTC archery mule deer and the mandatory reporting, there's just been a couple of questions of concern of like, how is Game and Fish, like, how are you guys handling concerns of over reporting or falsely reporting or not reporting? We had quite a few questions come up with different examples kind of talking about that. I know it's a newer thing, and so just some questions about that.
Yeah, as we all kind of navigate this brand new hunt structure, I'm sure there's going to be, little trials and tribulations with it, as there is any time. But, for us, just a little backstory on that. It was one of the better alternatives to still maintain as much opportunity for over-the-counter, archery deer hunts as possible without going to a draw. And hopefully that works. But, we've seen such an increase in both participation and attendance and interest and harvest, as well as people are getting better and better at finding where these deer are at, and equipment is getting better, that our harvest has far exceeded what our hunt guidelines were, and we had to start taking some action. And over the last several years, people were seeing a lot of these units closed down to over-the-counter deer structures. So yeah, I think it's a great opportunity to open up a lot of units that have been closed. But yeah, it's coming up with that harvest threshold wasn't really too difficult, because we've already been managing for that 20% of take within a unit for a deer species to be by archery and the over-counter structure. So that's already been in place for well over a decade or 15 years. So it wasn't hard coming up with those figures and thresholds. But the mandatory reporting is going to be like any other law enforcement, regulation or rule that we have, that we're going to follow up on that, majority of people, if not, 99% of them are ethical hunters. They want to do the right thing, because if they don't, it just restricts more access and has more regulation come on it. I know a lot of people are saying we'd love to see mandatory inspections, just like what we do with black bear and lion and bighorn sheep. But when you figure you harvest roughly 2,500 or 3,000 deer over the course of the year, to have somebody available at department offices to check in all those animals, whereas we do roughly 400 to 500 bear and lion across the year, that's 5 times as many. It would be really tough to do mandatory reporting that, and some of that might shift and change as we learn more how this works. Having the e-tagging and the online check-in of whether we have something for attaching a picture for it, because a lot of people want to show their harvest and stuff like that. But yeah, the mandatory reporting, Arizona used to have it, that it was mandatory reporting and worked fairly well, and we don't think it's going to be a hard transition. We've already accounted for any potential over harvest that there might be through a weekend. When we came up with those thresholds, we rounded down to the nearest 5. So take a unit that had a mule deer threshold of 40, it might have actually been 44, what we figured throughout our analysis, and we rounded down to 40 just to account for that potential over harvest. And those are probably going to change over the next couple of years as we see those trends come in. So yeah, we're kind of looking forward to it, mainly because it did maintain a ton of opportunity instead of closing them down for draw.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's perfect. And I would say, with any of these, like, oh, I'm getting a little bit of feedback on my end. And I think it's one of those things too, like Montana's going through a similar thing. I've hunted a couple other states that are, because of the influx of hunters and stuff like that, like you obviously have to change some of the ways that we're reporting our regulations, any of the structures. And so it's, it's just nice. I think a lot of where the concern comes from is just not understanding the full context of it. And so super helpful. Appreciate you definitely giving the context there. I'm sure if you need, if you have more questions, going to the website, you'll be able to find quite a bit of stuff, or at least get in touch with someone who can answer it.
Yeah, and on the hunting page, I think under the harvest reporting, just within the last week or two, we added an FAQ, page on there. That same way, a lot of the questions that we were getting. See if we can navigate into that.
Yeah, I'll go back to that.
And actually, if you go into like the hunting and the game species, with the little deer on it right there.
There.
Yeah, there we go. That second line says hunting mountain lion, black bear, OTC, archery deer.
Yep, perfect.
Yeah, we've got some FAQs on there and some descriptions. So a lot of the questions that we were getting as well, we kind of catered the response off of this, to a lot of that. So hopefully this answers a lot of the questions and clears it up. I know there's, a lot of concern out there, but I'm comfortable with where we're going, more than comfortable, just like I said, because it is opening up a lot of opportunity units that have already closed, so that's going to be out there. So
yeah. Quick time check. It looks like we're hitting about time. We'll answer, one or two more questions. I think since this one's scouting, one good question is just best times to scout, both day and also like just time of year. What's your recommendation as far as like in the field scouting? What time of the year would be a good time to start scouting?
Well, for one, any time of year out in the woods is not bad.
Yes.
Whether you're actually, waiting to use that as a scouting trip, you could say that all the time just to give you encouragement to get out there in the forest. But with a lot of our units, if you look not just in whether you're interested in the deer, regulations or the elk, that a lot of our units, there is almost a hunt every week, from August, September timeframe until, with javelina, into March. So I always kind of, remind people to be really respectful because somebody else is out there, probably hunting. So, kind of limit your scouting. But anytime, as soon as you draw that tag, this will, e-scouting is the first thing that I would do, figuring out the road access and some of the areas that you want to go and figuring that out, especially this time of year when it is really hot and you don't want to be hiking in, to a lot of the areas and not want to carry 2 gallons of water with you. That figuring out your road access, kind of your distributions of water, over the last couple of years, some of your, burns, everything that you've gone through is key for the first couple of months. And then within about a month, I think is a really good time frame to get out there on the ground, start seeing what the habitat looks like, start looking for animals, and just knowing that, all of that could change 1 week before your hunt. If you get rain or you get snow, it's going to change the distribution of those animals by, potentially a couple of miles, if not a little bit more. So really exerting yourself and keying in on one area 3 weeks before your hunt. Don't want to say it's wasted effort because you're learning every time that you're out there of what that habitat is, how you can get access into something. If you're seeing animals there, you're close.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
But just know that if you're out there, there's probably somebody sitting underneath a tree, waiting for an animal to come across or glassing as well. And just be cognizant of that.
Yeah.
With the lower densities in Arizona and the limited amount of tags and how long it takes to get some of those permit tags to hunt. Yeah, we all need to, just be cognizant of that of each other and be respectful.
Yeah, no, for sure. I agree. I think, as soon as you find it, e-scouting is great. The other thing too is like just learning the area. So like camping trips, backpacking trips, just going out for a drive and understanding the road system, and you can do that any time of the year. And so once you start to actually know where you're hunting, then you can come back, validate some of your e-scouting. And I would say, and it depends on the timing, but if you're hunting, like if you're looking for, for an extreme example, if you have a late season rifle elk tag, don't expect to see game in that area during that time. They may be there, they may not, but obviously the animals are moving. So don't get discouraged. You're really looking for the type of terrain that they're going to be at that time, looking for some old sign, whatever it may be. But I would say early on, learn the area, scout it out, and then as you get closer to that season, whatever it may be, then you can start looking for the animals and trying to validate there.
Absolutely. And one of the things that was told to me, like 25 years ago, getting into this is, if you get discouraged with the hunt that you actually have, because it's the first time that you come into the unit and you weren't successful or you didn't find that many animals, don't give up on the unit. You have learned so much for access and where to go. Keep putting in for that unit. And the more that you learn it, the better your success is. And those that might just jump from one unit to the next time they draw a tag a couple of years later, something totally new, you're starting from scratch, and then start scratch again because you got discouraged. That don't let that discourage you. They're there. We wouldn't recommend the number of permits that we do if the animals weren't there, on our population surveys and modeling that we do. They're there. It's just a matter of figuring out exactly where they're at. And there's a reason, there's 25 or 30% success. So, 2 out of 3 people are not going to be successful, but don't let that discourage you. Keep coming back to the same unit. Keep learning it. The more you learn, the better you're going to be.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Dustin, I really appreciate it. This has been awesome. I've learned a ton. There's been a couple of questions of like, where can I go to find even more information? Some from like certain strategies for species, some for regulations. Definitely start on Arizona Game and Fish website. They have so much information. They have videos, everything there.
That focuses in, but Jim Heffelfinger's book of Deer of the Southwest, if you're wanting to come down and hunt mule deer or cows, deer, either one, excellent book. That he gets into everything from the genetics to the species itself, all the habitat needs and hunting. It's a great book. But as you kind of go through that and learning that spend as much time as you can with all of these online resources. And then if you come up with a small list of really detailed questions that you just can't seem to find the answer, then you can call one of the 6 regional offices and ask to talk to the game specialist, for the big game hunting. And, just a shout out for all of them that, we've got tons of work to do, and our office time is fairly limited with everything that we do. So we do appreciate those that call up and say, hey, I've only got, a few questions, that I can't find the answer to. Do you have, 15 minutes or something like that? And I'm always glad to talk to hunters and, spend that kind of time, with them, especially if they're well organized, before they actually call, as opposed to just, hey, I drew this tag. What do I do?
Yeah.
Well, and this is a great seminar to, lead into that of here's a ton of resources we have that a lot of people aren't, aware of, and do a lot of that research beforehand and then come up. But like I said, if you got a specific unit, look at the regional map, and then you can call the regional office and say, hey, I got a few questions, on hunting deer or elk, in this unit. Can I talk to, the game biologist there?
Yeah, absolutely. And, some other things too, is there's a lot of great resources online as well. Like Jay Scott's podcast, he dives into cows here all the time. Hunting Fool, close partner of onX's. Those guys know so much about different strategies and tactics to hunt elk throughout the entire West. And so getting in touch with them, checking their magazines out. We are also going to have more webinars coming up with individuals talking, not necessarily a states focused elk hunting, but just elk hunting in general. So we have some archery elk ones, we have some rifle ones from folks like Born and Raised Outdoors, Eastman's, some of the meat eater guys. And so there's a ton of resources out there where you can kind of refine your different tactics, because everyone hunts a little different. Everyone scouts a little different because they're looking for different ways to do it. And so just taking little pieces from each one and kind of building your strategy is always a good place to start. But I do agree with you. Like, once you get zeroed in, hunt the area and just time in the field, and you'll just continually get more knowledge and more confidence, and you'll start seeing more and more animals.
Yeah, we're living in a great time, with technology and resources available that it's just making everybody, so much more informed and educated about hunting. And we're seeing those success rates go up, which is great. So 20 years ago when we didn't have all of this, it was totally a challenge, to do that. And, being able to e-scout and use these resources extends your hunt, and your excitement level for it. Instead of only over a couple of weeks time frame or something like that, you can spend a couple of months, really diving into this and learning, everything about it, and just, embrace it.
Yeah, no, it's crazy with all the resources now. It's like, you can almost get like 10 years of knowledge in like 10 minutes. And what would take 10 years of going to the same spot and learning it, there's so many different resources now that you can really zero in. So yeah, I appreciate it, Dustin. Just, you know, an update for everyone. We're going to be sending an email with a ton of these resources that we talked about tonight. It will have everything from like the harvest statistics, where to hunt. And so we have a bunch of links coming your guys' way. Also, make sure to get in there for the giveaway, and, you know, stay tuned for some of these other webinars we have coming up. There's going to be a lot of different stuff from hunting deer, hunting elk throughout the West. And so there's definitely some good tidbits you can take there. But then, yeah, Dustin, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
I'm sorry we couldn't get to a lot more of the questions. We could be here till midnight answering all these. So I greatly appreciate everybody's interest, you know, in it. And I wish we could answer those, but unfortunately, time gets us all. But yeah, thanks to everybody for chiming in.
Another one going into hunting season next year.
Great.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone, and have a great evening.
Thanks, Zach. Appreciate it.
Yep. Thanks, Dustin.